Welcome, Dr. Desselle, to our CPPI monthly seminar series. We're so excited to have you. For those of you who may not be familiar with Dr. Desselle, he's Associate Dean for Research, Professional Affairs, and Chair of Pharmacy Practice and Social Pharmacy, and Professor of Social and Behavioral Pharmacy at Touro University. This is in California. He received his BS in Pharmacy from University of Louisiana Monroe and his PhD from ULM as well. He has served on the faculty at Long Island University as Director of Assessment at Duquesne University, and then Associate Dean and Chair at University of Oklahoma and Dean at California North State University. So lots of experience here. He's also our dear Editor-in-Chief of RSAP. I have the privilege to serve on the editorial board for a number of years now, and have witnessed, and really been fortunate to be a part of this huge growth that this journal has had. He is a co-editor of Pharmacy Management Essentials for All Practice Settings, 5th edition, and then one of the most widely used pharmacy texts in the world, as you will know. He won the American Association of Colleges of Pharmacy Sustained Contribution in Social Sciences Award in 2019 in recognition of his research, teaching, and service in pharmacy education. So we're very fortunate to have your expertise here, and I'll just turn it over to you. And thank you once again for accepting to be our speaker this month.
Thank you, Teresa. If I'd have known you to read all that, I wouldn't have sent it. But I'm really happy to be here with you all this morning, and especially, I mean, I'm always happy to run my mouth, I guess, but I'm especially happy to do so to talk about the Granada Statements, and I'm so glad that Teresa invited me over. I assume that everybody can see my screen here. Yes. Okay. So. Well, I'm going to talk with you about the Granada Statements. Hopefully some of you have heard of them, or if not, we'll definitely talk about them this morning, and how those came about and what they mean for social and clinical pharmacy, and what they mean for pharmacy practice and research moving forward. So let me see.
I'm just letting you know, yeah, we're in the view mode. I don't know if you want to switch it to presentation mode.
Okay, let's see here. Does that look good?
It didn't change for me for some reason.
It didn't change?
No.
Oh.
Let's try again.
Let's see. I put it on slideshow. How about now? Still no?
No. Yeah, it's still showing the slides. Do you have two screens?
Nope.
Just one.
I only have one screen, and I'm going into slideshow mode.
Right.
Do you have any animation? Because otherwise it looks
No,
okay. I think you can just go through like this.
No, I don't have any animation or anything.
Okay.
So if you pull over on the,
I can just you know, sometimes you never know. It's sometimes something's crazy, like just trying again works. You never know. What about now? Still nothing?
Still nothing. But that's okay. You know what you can do, Shane? If you want to drag and minimize the slides on the left, then most of the screen will be, yeah, I think that will work. Perfect.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Okay, Teresa, I don't know how much of this I'm supposed to say or read, but
yeah, just showing, and then I'll copy into the chat as well. No worries.
Okay, all right. You guys behave and do all the things that Teresa says for you to do here. Okay, so, well, let's talk about how this all came about. This came about from just having a discussion, myself and so another couple of people that Dr. Salgado knows very well, Fernando Limas and Victoria Cardenas and Derek Stewart, who is the editor for International Journal of Clinical Pharmacy. And we were on a call about something else, just talking about things. And I don't remember exactly how it was brought up, but we talked about how pharmacy just kind of spins its wheels a little bit. And Fernando mentioned that the nursing profession or nursing academia had some conference years back to try to help reach a consensus. So I had done some work since a while back on the whole concept of scientific paradigm, and that to our best knowledge, that term was coined by Kuhn in the 1970s. And then Anthony Biglan and Joyce Lodahl and Gordon followed up with some studies on this, and they came up with this concept of paradigm, and also pursuing something similar called interdisciplinary consensus. And so consensus basically lies within a discipline to the extent to which they agree on what to teach both undergraduate students, graduate students, what the research is, what the research priorities are, and how that research may be best conducted. So they did this extensive literature review and search, and also conducted studies of their own, and they found that there was these different disciplines that had progressed further in their scientific paradigm. And so I have interspersed here just some questions for CE. And what is the best description of scientific paradigm? Science is never wrong. It's consensus among scholars in a discipline about what to teach and research and how to do so. It's a forecast predicting the advances in science that might be made. It's the envisioning of the need for entirely new methods to address problems. Okay, and what's the answer to that? Am I supposed to say the answer now, or am I supposed to not say the answer?
Are you going to present it again?
No.
Then let people say on the chat, and then you can reveal the answer.
Okay. No one has said anything yet. Oh, B.
You can see the chat, right?
Yes. Yeah, the answer is B. It's certainly not that science is ever wrong. It has nothing to. We are going to be envisioning things to move forward, but basically, scientific paradigm is the current consensus that we have among us about priorities to teach and do research. So as I mentioned, interdisciplinary consensus is a measure of a discipline's scholarly progress. And Lodahl and Gordon did some really interesting things. They looked at dimensions, and this was based upon some interviews they had done on faculty throughout the University of Illinois system in several dozen different disciplines. And they found these disciplines as being pure versus applied, and life versus non-life. And I started doing research in this. Even my first graduate student, her name was Erin Holmes. She's now a professor at Mississippi, has been for a long time. And we looked at this actually as her master's project. And the literature is incredible. Now, let me just say now that pharmacy is one of those that we're kind of in between, because there's different disciplines within pharmacy that are pure and more that are applied. There's some that are more life versus non-life. But social pharmacy and pharmacy practice probably lack the sort of scientific paradigm that we think of. And normally it's thought of with the hard, quote unquote, sciences, like chemistry and physics and biology. And we saw tremendous implications. So for disciplines that lack scientific paradigm, it's actually, contrary to what people might think, is actually harder to publish in these disciplines. It's actually harder to write papers because there's a less standardized terminology. If you look at a lot of papers, let's say in pharmacology and medicinal chemistry, after the first paragraph, they jump into the methods. and you look at a typical paper in social and behavioral pharmacy, we spend 3 or 4 pages trying to argue, we really, really do need this study, I promise. And we're begging the reader, please, please understand that we need to do this study. And because we don't accept basic tenets that have already been established before, we keep reinventing the wheel. Well, I mean, how many papers have we had on the need for diabetes pharmacists engaged in diabetes management programs? I mean, there's been thousands of them. And so yet the 1010th paper is probably being written right now as we speak, and we have to feel like we have to convince people. And so we often just spin our wheels. There's implications even for teaching styles. Since there's a less standardized vocabulary, people who in the less established disciplines actually stutter more and use more ums and ers. So there's greater speech disfluency. They're typically rated lower in terms of their teaching by students. They have a totally different outlook on how on their respective departments and how they should be governed. They generally have a less positive outlook to the future for their discipline. It takes longer for new academicians in these disciplines to establish their new roles. They typically have lower salaries, lower merit awards, fewer opportunities for grants. To actually have higher stress and lower career satisfaction than people who are in high consensus disciplines. So again, a huge literature on this. And this is clustering the task areas into the dimensions. So you see there's a hard, soft, and pure applied dimension. So and as a non-life versus life system. So you see some of the disciplines that this initial study by Lodahl and Gordon looked at. You'll see like soft, applied, and non-life, or things like accounting, finance, and economics. Certainly some disciplines that we borrow from sometime, whereas you have pure, hard, non-life system like astronomy, chemistry, geology, math, and physics. So let's think about the concept of interdisciplinary consensus in pharmacy. There's if you look at teaching, organizational government, and graduate programming and research, there's actually somewhat few differences between the disciplines, because even medicinal chemistry we're all under the auspices of pharmacy. And so, yeah, there's differences between med chem and pharmaceutics and social and behavioral pharmacy, but the difference is along this vast continuum. If you wanted to start from low to high consensus disciplines, it's there, but it's not quite as disparate as if you just say compared chemistry versus language arts. But there are differences by type of institution, by gender, and by race, ethnicity of responding faculty. And this was a study that we did since a long time ago. And there are different ways we conceptualize teaching and research priorities. So if you look at pharmacy, and particularly pharmacy practice and social and behavioral pharmacy, as I mentioned, we continuously reinvent the wheel. I mean, a lot of papers that, being editor for RSAP, I can tell you that a lot of the papers we have just continuously reinvent the wheel. We often don't accept truths. We spend too much effort reestablishing the literature. We derive new names and terms. Okay, so look at drug use control, pharmaceutical care, medication therapy management, continuous medication management. And I swear there's a new term that tries to be proffered probably every week in pharmacy. And if you look at medicine and nursing, those kinds of things don't exist. It's nursing care and it's medicine care. That's it. And that's the way it's been for decades and decades. You can argue, and I could show you some literature. I'm not going to get into all that we sort of have an inferiority complex. And we often hurt ourselves by not having the proper studies, reinventing ourselves, not having enough systematic reviews that actually say where we stand now on any number of issues in pharmacy practice and social and behavioral pharmacy. So what is the best description of where pharmacy stands in achieving consistent? All subdisciplines of pharmacy are on equal footing. All pharmacy subdisciplines are on low consensus disciplines. Pharmacy practice and social pharmacy have made strides, but keep reinventing the wheel. And the social sciences and pharmacy are represented as having the highest pay and ability to publish of any other discipline. So what's the answer? Correct, it is C. We've got some sharp people on this call today. So I'm going to mention a study map, and I'm getting to the Granada statements, but I'm giving you some background and what serves as the sort of like some foundational basis for the Granada statements. So this was a map actually that my first couple of grad students, Aaron Holmes and a guy named Mark Conklin, who went on to be like a vice president over at the Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield in Pittsburgh. So this is not a model, but I would say it's a study map. And these are the things that me, my team, my fellow researchers, my former grad students, and just a number of people I've worked with over the years have been looking at in pharmacy, and particularly looking in pharmacy academia. And ultimately, we were trying, and Dr. Salgado and I were just talking a few moments about people leaving academia. And you see that's preceded by commitment. So we've examined commitment, faculty self-efficacy for teaching its research productivity, the nexus between teaching and research. In other words, are good teachers good researchers? Are good researchers good teachers? Or is it just the opposite? We've looked at things like institutional support and stress. This was a model that we've ultimately produced a few papers back. And I said this was a study map. This was more of a model on turnover intentions among faculty, which plays into the whole concept of interdisciplinary consensus as well as the Granada statements. Satisfaction with department collegiality, commitment, and department chair support. So if people are not, and I've seen this literature in other areas, if you're not getting along with your peers and you're not getting along with your supervisor, you're going to leave the job. And I can tell you, you're also going to get burned out. People often think that burnout is a result of having too many things on your plate. It's actually not. Burnout more likely results from a lack of collegiality among the department and not getting along with your immediate supervisor. And of course, commitment plays a big part in that. And where does this come in? Satisfaction with the teaching environment, satisfaction with research support, support from your dean, and interdisciplinary consensus on teaching. We actually looked at factors that were related to research productivity. So among faculty, this was pharmacy faculty specifically, we found that time spent in research academic activities, academic rank, where associate professors were the most productive in terms of putting out papers compared to assistant and full professors. Research self-efficacy, interdisciplinary consensus, there's that variable again, and academic discipline with people in the basic sciences being more productive than those in pharmacy practice and social and behavioral pharmacy. I'm having trouble. We actually looked at teaching self-efficacies, and this was pharmacy faculty nationwide. So pharmacy faculty tell us that they are pretty confident about providing an alternative explanation when students are confused, responding to difficult questions from students, making time available to students. What they're not as good at is motivating students who show low interest in the course, fostering student creativity, and improving the understanding of a student who is failing. Those are things that they say they have a much more difficult time with. So again, I've done some other research along with that the last few years, most of which has been published in AJPE or Currents in Pharmacy Teaching and Learning, a few other journals and so forth. We've looked at organizational culture, citizenship, productivity. Recently, we've taken a look at academic stars and Deadwood, concepts called psychological contract breach, use of motivating language, mentoring and mentoring programs. Now, so the Granada group was convened. So again, it started out with me and Fernando and Victoria and Derek. And Fernando reminded us of this group in nursing that met, and we all expressed at the time our feelings about, even though we had made strides as a discipline in pharmacy practice and social and behavioral pharmacy, and I'll combine those two and call it one discipline, like a lot of people do around the world. They just call it pharmacy practice. So we thought it would be great to try to gather some journal editors to address the issues. In other words, how can we make this better? How can we improve the visibility of pharmacy practice research? How can we enhance the impact factors of our relative journals? How can we really move the needle as far as the pharmacy profession and the visibility of pharmacy practice research is concerned? So we started planning, we gathered, we invited many more people, but ultimately we ended up with 20 attendees from 10 journals. We were later joined by Pharmacy Education Journal and FIP, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. We had the primary organizers, like I said, it was me, Victoria, Derek, and Fernando. And during the conference itself, we each presented 1 to 3 key topics, which I'll get to in just a second. We had a keynote from the editor of the International Journal of Public Health in Italy, and we had a guest speaker from Clarivate as well in the conference. So the Granada Group members initially were RSAP, Exploratory Research for Clinical and Social Pharmacy, International Journal for Clinical Pharmacy, Journal of Pharmaceutical Policy Practice, Pharmacy Education Journal, European Journal for Hospital Pharmacists, International Journal for Pharmacy Practice, Pharmaceutical Care España, Ars Pharmaceutical, Revista Brasileira, and we have been since joined by the Canadian Pharmacist Journal recently, the Canadian Journal of Hospital Pharmacy, Pharmacy Education, Drugs, Healthcare, and Patient Safety, which is a smaller journal that's just starting to uprise. It's edited by Rajendra Apparasu at University of Houston. The Journal of Pharmacy Practice and Research, which comes out of Australia, Farmacéuticos Comunitarios, which is in Spain, and currently the Journal of Pharmacy Practice, as well as Innovations, Pharmacy, and Current Pharmacy Teaching and Learning are all just kind of mulling the joining of the Granada Group, and for now asking that we keep them in touch of what's going on until their journal formally decides. And we actually have a meeting tomorrow where some of them are going to be. So what best describes the Granada Group effort? I think this is my last question. What best describes the Granada Group effort and its members? They're mostly US-based groups of scientific journals. It's an attempt to improve the rigor and visibility of pharmacy practice and education research. The group consists of journals mostly with no impact factor score, and the group's model is one of closed invitation that precludes new members, which I didn't talk about. We have an open invitation out to every journal. We've invited the Journal of the American Pharmacists Association, we've invited AJPE, we've invited American Journal of Hospital Health Systems Pharmacy. So the answer there is what? Right, it is simply an attempt to improve the rigor and visibility of pharmacy practice research and pharmacy practice and education research. And so just a quick time. So I had to show you a few pictures. I mean, we have to try to be a little fun today too, right? So this was my first trip to Granada, Spain, and it won't be my last. In fact, I was just telling Dr. Salgado that I'm applying for an associate professorship there, and told it looks pretty good right now. I'll know more in June or July, which will actually fund me to go there for several times over the next few years. But Granada, Spain is absolutely amazing, and the whole surrounding areas, Malaga, and of course a little bit north of there is Madrid and Cadiz and Seville, obviously, which is a world destination. So this is a few scenes from this is the world famous Alhambra in Granada, Spain, which you can spend basically an entire day looking at. It was an old fortress. And anybody recognize this by any chance? Dr. Salgado's looking hard. I have a couple scenes like this is one scene from Dorne and Game of Thrones. Just some more scenes from the Alhambra, which is just absolutely incredible, just sublime. More scenes from the Alhambra. This is just a scene within Granada, Spain. This is over in Seville, which is just a little over an hour and a half train ride. And this is La Catedral. I'm sure Dr. Salgado can say it much better than I can. The Seville, which I found out was the second largest cathedral in all of Europe. And I think I might have a couple more pictures from it. This is actually the Alcazaba in Malaga. And again, some more, this is from some scenes from the Alcazaba in Malaga, which again is an old fortress that's still intact, but has all this beautiful greenery around it. That's looking down into the Mediterranean Sea from the top of the Alcazaba in Malaga. This is an avenue in Malaga, which is the median is several hundred meters wide, with all this beautiful plant life. It's practically a botanical gardens in the middle of this avenue. That's looking down from the Alcazaba into an old bull ring. My daughter actually went and saw a bullfight, which I still can't believe. Just some more shots looking out into the Mediterranean. Again, this is still Malaga, which again is just a short. It's a major city not far from Granada. This is called they call this the Rodeo Drive of Malaga. Oh, some beautiful places. And there's near Malaga, there's these beautiful little coastal cities. And one of them is Trujillana. And so Victoria Cardenas, and some of you may know her. She publishes a lot. She's sort of one of the queens of implementation science worldwide in pharmacy. She's awfully cool, one of the nicest people I know. And she was that's me and my wife and my daughter. And she was taking us out to these little villages along the Mediterranean. This is us in Trujillana, and this is Seville. And I had a little movie to play, but we'll see if we have time. In Seville, we caught some live flamenco dancing, and it was just really awesome. But sometimes my computer acts very sleepy and has a tough time playing movies. This is in the cathedral. Let's just say the Seville Cathedral. Let me just quit trying to act fancy this morning. And this is, when you go to a nice church, a nice Catholic church, and I'm Catholic, and you typically have an altar. Well, the Seville Cathedral, I think, has 23 altars. It takes several hours to go through. It's absolutely amazing. And this is capturing just a few of the various altars in the Seville Cathedral. It's an absolutely, yeah, this is all within the same building. It is absolutely phenomenal. And so we have published the Granada Statements in now 11 journals. And we're trying to figure out with the copyright if the 4 newest journals that have joined us, because we're 15 now and possibly maybe up to 18 or 19 within a few weeks, if they can publish as well. But the first of these was published in RSAP, and the title is, of course, Improving the Quality of Publications in and Advancing the Paradigms of Clinical and Social Pharmacy Practice Research. So that background I gave you was to give you the basis for what we wanted to do in terms of enhancing pharmacy practice. So we targeted 6 areas, and there's 6 areas that are global areas that are targeting the Granada Statements. So the appropriate use of terminology. And I'll say this, so we're meeting tomorrow, in fact, and so we actually have subcommittees within the Granada group, and one of them is terminology. And we know, for example, that FIP is actually working on a worldwide glossary of pharmacy practice terms. And so FIP is actually appearing at our meeting tomorrow, because likewise, we want to do the same, but we don't want to duplicate the work of FIP. So we're working with them hand in hand. And our glossary, of course, is going to be more related specifically to research and research terminology. No, I'm just giving you a hypothetical here. This is not an absolute yet. We're working on this. So for example, I've told you that we keep changing the names from some pharmaceutical care to MTM to CMM. And granted, each one is said to have a little bit different than the other, but really it's still pharmacy care. And so among the things we might do, and again, I'm not predicting exactly what this will look like yet, but one of the things I know that we're thinking about is we're going to accept a certain term and terminology for pharmacy care. That might be pharmacy care, it might be pharmaceutical care, it might be MTM. And that's what we're going to go with. And we're basically not going to accept any paper that utilizes other terms. And that's a commitment made by every journal in this group. And along with that, and I will get to some of more of this a little bit later, we're actually going to, we've had one meeting with National Libraries of Medicine. We're trying to schedule another one, and as well as with Clarivate, because we want to look at mesh terms. And our journals are also going to be committed to directing authors to utilize more mesh terms in their titles and in their abstracts. And by the same token, we're also going to lobby Clarivate and particularly National Libraries of Medicine to include more mesh terms that are useful in our lexicon. Because currently, there's a lot of people outside of pharmacy that look up things, and it may be pharmaceutical care or what have you, and they don't necessarily come up in people's searches. And even within pharmacy, they don't come up in our searches. We might happen to know of the papers, but outside of the discipline, we really don't. So that's what we mean by impactful abstracts. We're going to kind of develop some model abstracts that's kind of goes hand in hand with all of our journals. We've already, and we're trying to standardize certain things within our journal. For example, the first paragraph in describing all 15 journals that are part of the Granada group actually reads exactly the same. We identify ourselves as health services research journals that happen to niche in medication use, but we're defining ourselves as health services research journals. So the paragraph, introductory paragraph, is the same for all 15 journals, and I think all 15 have updated on their website. If not, they're in the process of doing so. And then after that, the second, third, fourth paragraphs, or whatever, that journal goes on to distinguish itself versus other journals in the Granada group. We're trying to identify ways to, and we're not the first to do this, we're trying to identify ways to reward peer reviewers more. We're not going to get our publishers to pay them expressly, and we know that the journals like MDPI kind of give you some credits for submitting a paper in one of their journals. We're trying to come up with something a little bit more uniform than that. That would sort of transcend, and we don't know yet the answers to all these questions. We have ideas, and we have ideas that we think are going to be better in all 6 of these areas and all the 18 Granada statements. We're not saying that it's going to be a panacea. Journal scattering is an issue, and this is something that we all talk about. So for example, I'm editor of RSAP, and we get plenty good papers. But we also get papers, and I guess every discipline has this to an extent, but I think it's a little bit more problematic for us in pharmacy practice as well as social behavioral pharmacy. We receive a paper, and you can tell it's like the 4th or 5th paper from a really nice project. So they'll even say they got the funding from so-and-so, and then they reference the other papers. And you can go in and look, and you can tell they've written some very impactful papers. It might have been some sort of new model where pharmacists were integrated with physicians in a federally qualified health center. But the primary paper that reports the outcomes of the pharmacists being in this new workflow in an FQHC was published outside of pharmacy. And then this fourth or fifth paper that said, oh, by the way, did people like being in it? So did the pharmacists like being in this workflow? And that's not unimportant, but it's not the main paper. And so we find that the main papers are being published oftentimes elsewhere. So we're trying to identify means of incentivizing, creating more visibility, more impact for our own journal so that the primary paper is sent. I in fact, just a month ago, actually did away with protocol papers being published in RSAP. We allowed people, for example, to have just gotten a competitive government grant to send us a protocol paper prior to publishing, prior to actually collecting data. Well, what we were finding is that, yeah, we published a protocol paper, and once they gathered the data, then they published it outside of pharmacy altogether. So that's another thing that we're working on. We're actually trying to work on selecting the most appropriate journal. There are some papers, certainly, that can be published in maybe 2, 3, maybe even 5 or 6 of our respective journals. But there usually is a best home for a paper. And yes, when you get a paper rejected, you send it somewhere else. We all know that. We've done it. There's nothing wrong with it. But if a paper has been rejected 2 or 3 times, it starts to carry a little stench, as I always say. And when, by the time you send it to a 3rd or 4th place, guess what? Some of the reviewers are common, and I've gotten this before. Oh, I've reviewed this paper already for another journal, and I don't like it. And so it starts to carry a stench. And so we're trying to help people because, RSAP is very theory driven. Some people send us papers that I guess you might call them a little too clinical, if you will, that might best belong in the International Journal of Clinical Pharmacy, for example. And so we're trying to help people to do that. And in fact, another thing that we're doing, now mostly we're with different publishers. There are a few of us that are within the same publisher, like Elsevier or Dove Press or Taylor and Francis. Within the same publisher, of course, we're able to transfer papers from one to the other. Like I transfer papers from RSAP to ERCSP on a regular basis, if the author so chooses to accept that transfer. But we're going to develop a web portal. While we can't transfer from one publisher to another, we're going to develop a web portal that's going to allow, I may make a reject decision, but think that the paper is very, very appropriate, say, for International Journal of Pharmaceutical Practice or Journal of Pharmaceutical Policy and Practice. So here, Babar's journal that does a lot in terms with developing countries. So I'm going to put in my decision letter, which is something about that portal that'll take the person to that, and then more so the journals are going to come to an agreement about stylistic considerations so that it's easy to, so even though we can't execute a formal transfer from one journal to the other, we're going to make it as easy as possible to try to transfer one paper to another journal within the Granada group. Using metrics wisely, while we're trying to increase our impact, we're all trying to do that. We also are cautious about relying solely on impact factor and so forth, and just being cautious about appropriate utilization of H indices, of impact factors, and so on in terms of making decisions for us. So yes, we want to raise the profile and visibility of practice, but we don't want to be the sole basis behind which we are making our publication decisions. So as I've said, we're working on a glossary. We're working with Clarivate as well as National Libraries of Medicine. We're working on transfer agreements, and this is all about teamwork. I mean, these are journals that could be are somewhat competitive with each other, and we say, you know what, we are throwing that out the window. We want to work together. We want to make pharmacy practice, social and behavioral pharmacy more visible, more rigorous in terms of publishing, more standardized, and more widely viewed by the entire world. So We've started these occasional meetings. We're meeting tomorrow, and we're actually going to begin holding public open forums. So if people want to jump on with a group of us editors and ask us questions, give us their opinion, we're actually going to hold these public meetings, public meeting via Zoom. And we already have secured funding for our next Granada group meeting, which we're anticipating might be in summer 2024. So that's the update on where we are now. Oh, I guess I had one more of these. Which of the following is true? Medicine and nursing are two disciplines that are always renaming the type of care they provide to patients. There are ample mesh terms that accurately describe the work of pharmacists. The potential rise in pharmacy practice journals serves as a threat to medicine, nursing, and other health professions, and scholars in pharmacy have not always submitted their best work within pharmacy journals. And of course, we know the answer to that. The answer is D. And one might, I didn't go over this necessarily, but there is nothing threatening about we're not trying to step on anybody's toes. We're not trying to step on medicine, nursing, anywhere else. We're just trying to make us the best that we can be. And part of that would include collaborations, because more often than not, higher impact papers are those that involve collaboration between pharmacy and medicine, pharmacy, nursing, or pharmacy and other professions. So this is some more some more stuff here for our for the purpose of the CE with VCU today. And my closing statements is, if you will, is you can read that for yourself, and I really do mean that. And I wanted to leave enough time to have some discussion with you all, and I thank you for your attention and also having me here today. So I would love to take on any questions or comments. Dr. Salgado, I think it should be required of Rotana to ask a question or submit a comment. I think it should be required.
She's going for it.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Really nice presentation. Thank you. I guess one of the things that I was thinking about when you were saying that you wanted to have standardized terminology is that pharmacy practice or social pharmacy is very broad in terms of the disciplines used: epidemiology, economics, psychology. So how are we going to standardize terminology? Is it just related to pharmacy terms like medication adherence, clinical pharmacy? What are those? But in terms of the discipline that is used, I think it's going to be hard to have a standardized terminology when we have so many disciplines under social pharmacy.
Yeah, well, and you're very right. And that's the thing that we think is going to be the most challenging. A couple of the journals so far that have wanted to join us that are hesitant, that's actually the one thing that's given them pause. Now, there's going to be very few American-based journals associated with a professional organization like JAFA and AJHP are not, because that's just a whole political thing, and I'm not going to get into it right now because it'll actually upset me if I start getting into it. But that's the one thing that's given people pause, and it will be specifically toward pharmacy and pharmacy practice. So this is not going to be a very extensive list. It's just, and rather it's going to be a list of suggested terms. There probably will be some terms that we're just not going to accept. There's probably just going to be a few of those, but it's more so recommending some terms that we prefer utilizing and trying to educate people on what those terms are. Because again, if you look at other disciplines, they don't do what we do. You know, medical care hasn't changed names every few years. They may have an innovative practice model within a very specific subdiscipline within neurology or what have you, but they don't really give it these names. And if somebody finds examples of that, please share them with me, because we'll hold open forums on that. So yeah, I think it's going to be limited, and we're basically also waiting on FIP is joining us tomorrow. They haven't shared a document with us yet. I know they've been working on it, because I'm part of this FIP pharmacy technician group that's been talking about this glossary for 2 years now, but evidently they're getting close. So we're going to be working with them. FIP has been huge supporters of this. We're actually inserting a Granada Group's slide into FIP digital events right now. FIP is doing its own publicizing. They're doing their Twitters. They're doing Facebook posts. They have things on their own website about the Granada Statements. So FIP also is a big believer in trying to come up with this glossary of terms that more aptly describe what it is that pharmacists and other pharmacy workforce members like technicians do. And that's what it's going to be more aimed at. It's like this accurately describing what we do.
Yeah, because this is also something I was thinking about. When we're talking about medicine or nursing, I feel like everyone knows what they do, like what nurses do, what doctors do. But when it comes to pharmacy, there has been a lot of changes and a lot of roles throughout the years that people are still not very familiar with, even people within the pharmacy discipline. So I think this also all contributes to why things are kind of all over the place right now.
But Rotana, I would say that nurses and physicians' roles have evolved a lot too. They have changed. They have become more specialized. They're doing things now that they weren't doing 30, 40 years ago, but yet they don't change the terminology. Medical care is still medical care. And whether you're in a nephrology clinic or in an ICU, medical care is medical care. And we can say there's critical care. Well, that's a branch, but it's not a renaming of the entire concept of what medicine does. So yeah, I see what you're saying, but we act as though pharmacy practice has changed a lot and these others haven't. They have too. In fact, you might argue that they've changed more. And so we want to try to kind of put the brakes on all these acronyms and so forth that we get in pharmacy very, very much.
I think it's the part where the pharmacist became more clinical. That's kind of a little different when it comes to medicine and nursing, because everyone had an idea of what a pharmacist is, and it's usually like over the counter, I think. At least like from other countries, the whole PharmD and then transitioning to residency and clinical practice is something new. Maybe not in America, but in other countries it is.
Yeah, but in some countries they've actually evolved more than we have. You know, I visited some pharmacies in Scandinavia, and the pharmacist doesn't dispense at all. I was in some pharmacies in Finland, and they have the counters where the technicians are, and of course the technicians are like I'm referring to, for example, in Denmark, and of course Denmark technicians are trained more. They're pharmaconomists, and they have 3 years of in-house training and so forth over at Pharmacon. And the pharmacists there basically just talk with patients. That's all they do. There's always a pharmacist sitting across from a patient, and yet to their credit, they don't have a name for that. It's what the pharmacists do. And it's more that now than it was 30 or 40 years ago, but they haven't come up with a new acronym for it. There's not a special acronym for the differences in practices between Finland and Denmark versus here. So I hear what you're saying is that yeah, everybody has changed, but we've gotten more clinical and so forth and so on. But I would say that if you really took a historical look at the practice of medicine and nursing and occupational therapy and physical therapy, you'll see huge changes as well.
I have, does anyone else have any questions? Let me look at the chat. I don't see anything. So while people think of questions or type them into the chat, I will make a quick reflection. and I'll start with one and then we'll see if I have time for my second one. But I recently reviewed a paper for our SAP, which I can't reveal a lot. But it was precisely about finding a new definition for pharmaceutical care. And I think my reflection goes to, we will have to agree on the terminology and the term itself, but then the next level will be to agree on the definition of that term. And that can be tricky and complicated. But yeah, so I thought that I think we're all meaning well to the profession, and this came from one of the pharmacy groups. We all mean well and we're all working towards the same goal, but the efforts have been disjointed. And so I'm really excited to see that, you know, the editors of journals who really drive the publication of, you know, whatever comes out from us researchers are finally getting aligned and working as a team. So I think that's a huge kudos to all of the editors and to our profession. I think that's you know, a huge deal.
It's exciting because, you know, I mean, you know, there was the four of us, and then we invited a few more people, and a couple of people were enthusiastic right away. And then we invited Ian Bates and Christine Bond. And I don't know if you know Christine at all, but you know, she's just very, very British. She's just, and I mean, she walked into the hotel where we're all meeting in Granada, and the first thing she said, she says, "I have a lot of doubts about this." I mean, it was just the first thing she said. And now Christine is so gung-ho. Oh my goodness. I can't go a day without an email from Christine.
Yeah.
So I think the more people get into it, the more excited they will be.
Yeah, I think it's very exciting. So congratulations. And I already voiced this, that more than happy to be part of one of the subcommittees and try to help move things forward, or at least just contribute a little grain of sand to this whole enterprise.
Yeah.
Anyway, any other questions? Let me see the chat. Thanks everybody for coming by and for participating. And I hope that we all take away something from this seminar. We would love to have you at some point when there's more developments and advancements as part of the process, to sort of follow up on you know, what we're doing.
I would be very happy to do that. I mean, and that's when I was sharing this with a few people at APHA, and including Stephanie Junot, she's not even one of the editors, but she's really, really excited about this, and she's trying to get APHA to buy into it, but I know they're not. But you know, she was finding some papers. It actually piqued her interest in things like this, and there was an effort back in the 90s that was published in JAFA on creating a terminology and moving forward and so forth. She said, "Whatever happened to this?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." I said, "Maybe she assumed it was never used." And I said, "Well, maybe it has, maybe it hasn't. Maybe it helped inform some of the early CAPE documents. I don't know." But I said, it has to have a champion. And I said, if sometimes a professional organization may be either pressured from within or externally to produce a document like the Granada Statements, but if they don't really champion it after, or none of the people who comprise the committee champion it after, then it'll just be another of the millions of papers that have been published. And we have a group of us editors that are determined to continue championing this effort.
Yeah, that's excellent. All right, thank you so much. Thanks,
Well,
everybody.
again, thank you all very much. Appreciate your attention and your time today. Thank you all very much. And work on some good papers and send them to us.
Absolutely.